You're listening to Love and Libido with me, your host, Dr. Emily Jamia. The goal of this podcast is to educate and inspire. My hope is that you will learn tools to create connection and cultivate passion, both within yourself and in your relationships. Here's what's coming up on today's episode. I am so thrilled to have today's guest, who was recently featured on The Daily Show, by the way. Before I tell you about her, let me explain why everybody, whether you personally own a vulva or not, needs to listen to this episode. It may seem more common to hear men complain of things like penis size, but insecurity about the appearance of the vulva is becoming increasingly common. Aesthetic surgeries designed to change the appearance of the vulva are fast growing. It's common these days to see them advertised on plastic surgeon websites and OB-GYN websites. And in contrast to other cosmetic procedures, these surgeries can be risky, as you're about to learn in this episode. So why do both men and women need to pay attention? Because we are all responsible for changing the narrative about women's bodies. At the end of the day, pleasure is way more important than appearance. This is One Woman's Story. And please don't forget that I depend on your support to keep this podcast running. Be sure to subscribe, write a review, and share with a friend who might find it interesting. I am joined today by Jessica Pinn, and when I was thinking about the best way to introduce her, one word kept coming to mind, and that is crusader. She is a crusader not just of the clitoris, but really for women in general. I'm going to turn it over to her so that she can tell you a little bit about her story, and I think that by the end of it, you'll understand why crusader is the right word to describe her. Jessica, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, so I'm a crusader for better inclusion of clitoral anatomy in medical literature and curricula. And the reason why is because I had a labiaplasty when I was barely 18. I sought surgery because I had read online that protruding labia minora were considered unfeminine and embarrassing, that they were caused by excess androgens, that they were caused by sexual activity, masturbation, and aging. So I got the impression that they were this really shameful, embarrassing thing, that something was wrong with me, that I had labia minora that were really out of the norm. I read online that most women want labia minora that don't stick out, and mine stuck out. So I thought I had a problem. There wasn't any information on what was normal back then, like there weren't statistics on labia minora size. So I had no data to go off of, and I only had the derogatory statements that I found online and in peer-reviewed medical literature.
So just for anyone listening who doesn't know, let's just start with a very basic anatomy. So Jessica's referring to a labiaplasty, which is supposed to be a minimization of the labia minora. And if you think of a vulva, if you're looking at it gynecologically, you have the outer labia majora, which are like the outer lips, and then the inner labia, which are the labia minora. And for some women, the inner labia protrude a little bit. For some women, quite a bit. And this is something that a lot of women feel insecure about because of what Jessica was describing, what she had read online about a lot of the stigma that comes for women who have labia minora who protrude a bit, all of which is total BS, to be frank. But a lot of women, for those reasons, feel very insecure about that part of their body. And so it sounds like that's exactly what happened to you. And you began exploring the option of labiaplasty, which you ended up going through with at 18. So can you tell people a little bit about what happened when you woke up? Because it sounds like the doctor that you went to kind of went overboard.
Yeah, so he completely amputated my labia minora, and he did a clitoral hood reduction without my consent, and he damaged the nerves of my clitoris. So I lost clitoral sensation. After my surgery, I was told that my surgery could not have caused me to lose clitoral sensation. I was also told that I looked normal despite the fact that my labia minora had been completely removed. I went to 2 other OB-GYNs after my doctor. They both said the same thing, that my surgery could not have caused my loss of sexual function. And, I got very frustrated. And the whole thing was was extremely, extremely hard to talk about and very traumatic. And I blamed myself. And I remember, because of how we're taught that like these are things that you don't talk about. Yeah. When I first brought up my sexual function to my OBGYN, not to the doctor who performed my labiaplasty, but to his partner, actually, who was female, because I switched to his partner because I felt uncomfortable with him. Mm-hmm. And I remember like basically shaking because I was so nervous to be talking about like, oh, like I don't have, like I was having trouble orgasming. I couldn't feel much sensation. And it was so awkward to talk about. And I think that's one big problem that goes on is so many women have trouble talking about these issues.
And I think it's not just women who have trouble talking about these issues. It's the doctors themselves. I mean, these are the people we're going to and trusting them with, all of our physical health. And there is little to no training. I would err on the side of saying no training really for most medical professionals about how to talk to their patients about sex. And a lot of them will prescribe medications and they don't talk about the sexual side effects or obviously in your case, what the potential side effects could be. And it sounds like there was such a focus on the aesthetic and how it looked cosmetically. And there wasn't really any conversation, obviously prior or after, about how that might have changed things from a pleasure perspective.
Yeah, before my surgery, I actually was worried about risks to my sexual function, and I did search for information on that specifically. And I read online and in peer-reviewed medical literature that there were no risks to sexual function. I read that the labia minora played no role in sexual function, which is wrong. And yet many doctors still say that. I actually got a message from a woman yesterday who was telling me how she had been to doctors who had basically tried to talk her into labiaplasty, and that when she had asked them about the risks, they had said that the labia minora don't play a role in sexual function. To me, that is just crazy.
Yeah. So tell people what role they play.
Well, a lot of women really do have sensation in their labia minora. And I remember, when I was 17 and I was looking into this, I was aware that I had sensitivity, but because I read all these doctors saying that they didn't play a role, I sort of discounted my own judgment about my own body, which is sort of crazy to think about. But I think the authority that doctors have can cause us to discount our own feelings and judgments, right? Sometimes.
Totally. Yeah.
And so basically they have the same types of nerve endings as the clitoris, actually, just not as many. I also think they play an important role mechanically in facilitating clitoral sensation. That is not something that gets talked about much, but that was Masters and Johnson's theory for how women orgasmed during intercourse.
The sensation of the labia minora?
No, they believed that basically mechanical action on the labia minora translated to movement of the clitoral hood. And I think that's really valid. They also play a really important protective role. So one thing that happens is when the labia minora are completely removed, the vestibule is exposed. And that ironically can actually cause discomfort. It's a bit funny to me because they always attribute large labia minora to discomfort. I personally had no discomfort at all. So I'm always skeptical of that claim. And sometimes I think there are times when people feel like, if they have a problem with like a bike seat or some pants, they want to change their vulva instead of just like getting a new bike seat or new pants. And to me, that's a bit crazy because you shouldn't have to change your body to like fit the things in the world, I guess.
Right. Totally. So there are some cases, and these are a little bit more unusual, but they do happen, in which the labia, sometimes the labia minora, sometimes the labia majora, are significantly larger, and this can cause discomfort for some women. If you are listening and you think you might be one of these women, do your due diligence before considering an operation. Look online at pictures of vulvas. I'll post a reputable link in the show notes. And be sure to go to a surgeon who has advanced training in the complexities of female genital anatomy. If you liked this video, drop me a like and subscribe below. Share with a friend who might find it interesting. You can also listen to this in podcast form anywhere podcasts are streamed by searching for Love and Libido with Dr. Emily Jamia. Finally, follow me across all social media channels at Dr. Emily Jamia for daily emotional and physical intimacy tips.